This is John for Global Traveler. Today I have the pleasure of talking travel with travel expert, reporter, broadcaster, author, Christine Negroni. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm delighted to be here, John. Thanks for inviting me on.
Well, I appreciate you having you on. I appreciate you giving us time. I'd like to start off with how you got started in the industry and how you kind of switched your focus a little bit more to travel.
Okay. Well, I do travel a lot because of what I do for a living. So I've become an expert sort of by default just because I do a lot of it. But I wouldn't say it's my primary source of income. My primary source of income is aviation. And so I'll cut to your question, which is how did I get into it? I was a journalist. I was a broadcast news journalist for 25 years. And I was working at CNN at the time of a very big plane crash. It was TWA Flight 800. You and I are old enough to remember it, but some people don't remember it. But I worked on that airplane crash for about 6 weeks on the scene, and then I continued working on it for another 2 years, and then I wrote a book about it. I was at CNN, so I was still in television at the time. But when I wrote the book, I left television and I went to work because the subject matter was so fascinating to me. I went to work for a law firm helping them investigate the 9/11 disasters because they happened right after TWA 800. So I really immersed myself in the subject of aviation safety. And from that, I wound up going, after working with them for 8 years, I wound up going into back into journalism, but using my knowledge in aviation and aviation safety to specialize in that subject. So this meant I was on an airplane all the time. And I got the opportunity to travel to a lot of places, and better than just travel to them, I had the opportunity to spend extended periods of times in various places. Like Malaysia 370, I was 6 weeks in Kuala Lumpur and, traveled through Southeast Asia while working on that story. So it gave me an opportunity to sort of zone in on what I really love about travel. And I think what a lot of people do, which is learning how other people live. So that's the sort of long and short of it. That's how I got into it. And I'm pretty happy doing both. I'm pretty happy doing both aviation and travel.
Well, you're very successful and very popular with doing both. You mentioned one book. I know you've written two. See, I have them.
Look at you, both books. Thank you.
Absolutely. I told you they're on my bookshelf.
I call that the Christine Negroni collection.
And you got one more coming, which I'm going to talk to you about in a
I
little bit.
do. I sure do.
But as you're writing the books, or after you wrote the books, and you became kind of, the aviation expert, did you start to get different reactions from the people you were trying to, question? Did they shut you off at any point?
Well, yeah, I mean, aviation safety, writing about aviation safety means discussing things that a lot of companies and entities, entities don't want to talk about. And by that, I don't mean the investigation itself, but I mean some of the things that come up. Because if you take a look at the most obvious example, of course, is the 737 MAX, a lot of entities don't come out very well in that.
Right.
Um, Including a blog post I wrote about the NTSB making this big announcement about how the pilots were unaware that the cabin door would pop open in the case of a depressurization. And, as it turned out, that actually was not a secret to anybody except perhaps the pilots, but the NTSB was unaware of it. So they didn't want to answer questions about why they made a big fuss. Um, because they didn't look particularly good in that. So, as a journalist, it is not my goal to tear down anyone, only to report the facts. Because, and there's a great analogy in reporting to air safety, and that is if you don't know about a problem, you can't fix it. And in aviation safety, the goal is not to say this this businessman or this mechanic did a bad thing, shame on them. The goal is to say this failed, this person, this entity failed. Why? How do we fix that? How do we prevent that? It's a no blame culture. And so when I report on these things, it is not to blame. I mean, with rare exceptions, sometimes there is blame to go around, but it's not to blame. It's to bring these things to light so that they can be fixed. And in that's a roundabout, sorry, that's a bit of a roundabout answer, but but some people don't like that. And I get it. You know, if I made mistakes in journalism, which I obviously do, I wouldn't like people like saying, you know, look, Christine Negroni, what an idiot she is. She wrote this instead of that. And, you know, but I don't like it. Nobody likes it. It's not comfortable. I'm not saying it's comfortable, but it's important.
Sure. Well, along those same lines, there was something on your website which I absolutely love. That I think it's really important, a really important piece. You talk about being labeled a disaster queen, but then you juxtapose it with your love of travel. I would love if you could kind of do a short version of that now.
Well, if you write about air disasters, as I do, and failures, as I do, then people think that that's all I write about, and and it's not at all what I write about. Whether I'm writing about aviation or travel, I like to write about success. Success is the goal. Whether it's you're successful in understanding a culture, in seeing something new about humanity because of the way you've spent time in the company of whoever, you know, is having tea in Japan or having coffee in Ethiopia, then I think that's the absolute opposite of disaster. That's the ultimate success. And the same would be true in air safety. That if a company learns this design that we made, it's not right. How did we fail to recognize this, that, and the other thing? Let's not do that next time. That's not a disaster. That's the opposite of disaster. And sometimes I like to call that catastrophe's silver lining,
I
right?
like
Because
that.
we know that every disaster, whether it's a personal mistake you make or an exam you got wrong when you're studying, when you see the error and you recognize it, that's a success.
I like that. I like the catastrophe silver lining. I like that. Um, with your close relationship with aviation and travel, has it changed the way that you look at travel as you're just going on a regular trip?
Well, I would say this, you know, I know you mentioned to me before we did the interview that you were going to ask about this, and it made me think about the way I look at travel coverage now versus before I was writing about travel. And that is, you know, you pick up the paper, you log on and you see, like, for example, your Bing picture when you log on. It's some amazing place, you know, some beautiful natural scene or whatever. And you think, oh my gosh, that's just beautiful. I want to go there. And then, of course, then 2 days later, you'll be reading something else, and that same destination will appear, or you know, list of 10 top places to go, and damned if that place isn't in there again. And then you realize some country, city, you know, destination just got a bucket of money to promote their destination, and the result of it is I'm now looking at it and saying I got to go there. So that has changed. So I have a more adult view of how what the media puts forward is manipulated, you know, for the gain of the destination. I understand that now. And I understand that travel journalism is a highly subsidized business. A lot of journalists are going out on somebody else's nickel to see a destination, and you have to keep that in mind. Some reporters are very good about disclosing that, others are not. And then the last thing I would say about that is that we are and I feel a bit like I'm raining on the parade of travel, but we are really in a world in which some destinations are totally over touristed to the detriment, I think, of those destinations, to the people who actually live there. And I think that I'd like to see a lot more of in the travel world is responsible travel, where um, where the locals are consulted on how much travel they're going to allow, how much Airbnbs they're going to allow, how much cruise ships they're going to allow. Because I don't think it has a positive impact on a lot of countries now, a lot of cities. I traveled to Reykjavik for an aviation conference about 12 years ago, and nobody there spoke English. I mean, it was quite amazing because Icelandic is not a language that's easy to crack. And then I was there about 5 years after that, and then several times after that, and the difference was remarkable. This is a country of 350,000 people, and they know, you know everybody when when your country's that small. And when I visited there my most recent time, I was doing a piece for the New York Times about Iceland Air had this program where you could, if you were doing a stayover in Reykjavik, they would pair you up with an employee, and that employee would take you out and do something fun. It was called the buddy program. It was
Oh,
great. But I talked to, and the woman took me out on a boat, and we went fishing. And on the way back, I said to the captain of the boat, "So what's it like now with so much tourism in Reykjavik?" And he said, "Well, I go into the city, to the downtown of Reykjavik, which is not very big, and I don't know anybody on the street."
hmm.
And that was sad to me, because he's
Yeah.
seen his own hometown is now not his own. So I think these are things we have to address. And I guess that's my one worry about travel now.
No, it makes total sense. I see what you mean. Too many tourists, then all of a sudden it doesn't become your land anymore.
Yeah. And it's kind of an Instagram phenomenon or threads or, whoever is the latest with this stuff that um, a lot of younger people will, I think, use that to pick their destination. So if there's an influencer with, 250 million followers and they find some little secluded spot, some cove on the beach in, New Brunswick, Maine, all of a sudden, New Brunswick, fasten your seatbelt
And
because there's
yeah,
going to be a lot of people showing up. And that's, it's a quandary. No question, it's a quandary.
exactly. So how has aviation travel, the whole industry, how has that changed you?
Well, as you know, John, every interview you do, every person you meet, every place you go changes you in some way. I don't know that it's really you're even able to quantify that until you're at that next place where that piece of information is going to come in handy. But I would say that to the extent that I pay a lot of attention about safety and prevention, because safety is really all about prevention, um, I would say that it colors most everything I do when I travel or even when I'm home, and that I see the potential for what could go wrong in the things I see and do. So, um, so it goes to what we talked about over touristing, that when I go to a place and I see all that happening, I think this is going to have bad consequences sooner or later. It will either, like the Airbnb phenomenon, where Airbnb has made housing in lots of communities more expensive. So now you wind up with a gentrification and you wind up with a further economic divide. So I would say that seeing sort of that everything has consequences, and sometimes those consequences aren't good, which I learned in aviation safety, has made me more aware of that throughout mm, my travels, my life, and that I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, but sometimes it's a little more fun to be ignorant, right? To just go out and, and
It's
just have
true.
fun. But there's a lot of people now working on responsible travel. There's Google it and you'll see there's a lot of organizations that are really paying attention to this thing so that tourists don't come in, like charity tourism, which was highly touted 15 years ago, has started to, there's starting to be some downsides to that. And I wish I could remember the name of the film, but I'll pass it on to you if you do show notes.
Sure.
There's a documentary in which they talked about these people who'd come in and do charity travel and they stay in these orphanages or whatever, but that after a while it turns out that all of this coming in and leaving, people would come, they would bond with these children. It was somewhere like, I don't know, Vietnam or something, but they would come in, they would bond with these children, they would leave, then another group come, leave, and that this was not actually healthy for the children who really could bond to no one other. I mean, obviously they had their own caregivers, but that this was not necessarily natural or healthy. But the kids, the young people who came in and did this kind of tourism didn't do it to hurt anyone. They did it because they thought they were helping. So acts and consequences, I think, is in travel is kind of an important thing to think about, and people are doing it, which I think is a good thing.
That is a good thing. So on a lighter topic, could you tell us, you've been all over the world. Tell us a couple of your favorite spots and a couple spots that you either want to go again or have never been.
Okay, I will. I have to say, I don't I don't have a favorite, but I have places that I like for certain things. But what I'd tell the most surprising places I went to that I didn't have really much of a desire to go to and fell in love with were Japan. I had no desire to go there. I don't understand the art or the food. I don't like Japanese food. Um, and and I went for a conference, and I'm telling you, I totally fell in love with it. My first time there, I said I'm coming back, and I did. I've gone back many, many times.
Wow.
Still don't get the food, but I do love the culture. I love the culture. And I would just wish the rest of the world would be more. I am not an individual. I am part of a larger unit, because that part of Japan is remarkable, and I think it really works. Really works. The other country that I went to for work and had no thoughts of one way or the other was Ethiopia. And the people are lovely. The food is amazing. The music, the dance, the art, every part about it. And it's chaotic scene. I mean, there's a lot of people living in Addis Ababa, and you're just sort of thrown into the melee, and but people are lovely, accepting and warm and eager to talk to you. And dancing is phenomenal. I've done a couple of pieces on in Ethiopia for the New York Times, including one on dance. So those are two that are highlights for me. And if anyone were to ever say to me, Christine, would you like to go to Ethiopia? Why don't you go to Ethiopia? I'm there. I'm on the next plane for sure. Um, I love being out in nature. Most people do. So I like any place that's going to get me closer to nature. Um, give me some. I've been to so many places. It's kind of hard for me to sort of knock them out. But I'll tell you yes or no. You want to do the yes or no?
Sure. Chicago.
Love Chicago, lived there for 10 years. Do love it. Do love it. It's as far as the time you can be there is limited, right? But when you're in there in the summer or the spring, yes, I say yes to Chicago.
Canada.
Canada, very nice. Like Canada. I mean, it's a big place, obviously. I did have the opportunity to drive. I have a camper van, and I like to do some of my travels by driving, and I did go through Canada. And I have to say that people are lovely, they're very friendly. The scenery is magnificent. I mean, and the kind of critters you see, well, that's kind of great. I'll tell you one of the places I saw, I wish I could remember the town. But it's knowable by a Google search. It's the town where they have every other year they have the chainsaw sculpture contest.
I know that, and I don't know the town.
Adorable town, lovely people, and it's famous not just for the chainsaw, but apparently Rocky Balboa, who is that actor?
Stallone.
Sylvester Stallone. Sylvester Stallone is like their honorary citizen, because I believe he made a movie there. One of his first
Oh,
movies was made
okay.
there. And so every other year when they have this thing, there's also a Sylvester Stallone Rocky Fest. It's called Rocky Fest. That's it. There must be some relation to the Rocky. So they have this Rocky Fest, and that's a lot of fun. And you got to love a town that sort of has Sylvester Stallone as its patron saint.
I'll give you one more. Alaska.
Never been. So that goes to your last question. That goes to your last question when you said, where would I like to go? I would love to go to Alaska. I've never been, and it's just a damn shame because it has a very strong aviation infrastructure. Of course, more people on private planes in Alaska than per capita than any other place in the country. Um, Beautiful, it's magnificent. I mean, what can you say? Our last state. What can you say? Who doesn't want?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I mentioned
Have
earlier,
you been? Have you
I've
been?
not been to Alaska. I've been to Canada, been all over the United States, have not been to Alaska yet.
Yeah, it's time.
It's on my
It's time we
list.
go, John.
It's on my list.
Yeah, we got
So
to
we
move it
both
up
have
to
to
the.
go.
Yeah,
Put
yeah,
that
yeah,
on
yeah.
our bucket list.
We'll stay in touch. We'll stay in touch.
Absolutely. Now you mentioned a third book. You have two books, obviously. You've got the Crash Detectives and you got Deadly Departures. Could you give us a scoop, a little hint, anything on the next book coming out?
Well, my next book is a little serious. My next book is about Boeing and how it got to the 737 MAX. So there's a lot of reporting suggesting that Boeing was this wonderful company full of Boy Scouts who did everything right, and in came McDonnell Douglas and took over, and Harry Stone Cipher sort of brought the McDonnell Douglas evil ways with him, and that's what turned Boeing, into the company that is now so flawed. And I don't believe that, frankly. my research shows that Boeing's problems with design and manufacturing and hiding the same goes back into the 60s. And my book is actually going to go back historically and take a look at some of these issues and why, um, why it got away with what it got away with, how it got into this habit of habitually lying and taking shortcuts, and that the max is not some new thing. It's the next generation of not such a good thing. So that's the book. It's called Unmasking Boeing. I'm actually thinking we might do it as a podcast as well. I'm talking to a podcaster about that, and so it might come out in two mediums.
Okay. Any idea when?
No, 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 no.
Okay.
That I cannot say.
Then people
Definitely
need,
not 2024. I
okay,
can
well, then
promise you
people
that.
need to stay tuned to your stuff and to Global Travel, because we
Yes.
certainly tell everybody.
Yep,
While we're
yep.
on that subject, before I let you go, tell everybody where they can find out more information about you.
Okay. So I'm easy to remember. If anybody ever drinks a Negroni cocktail, I'm easy to remember because that's me. Negroni. So it's ChristineNegroni.com. No dots, no dashes, no underscores. ChristineNegroni.com. My website just got on overhaul yesterday. We're still working out a few of the kinks. So ChristineNegroni.com, everything's there. Everything my Twitter or X or whatever they call it these days, my Insta, my Facebook. I have a Facebook group called Flying Lessons. I have a Facebook group called Go How Know How. So, but everything's at ChristineNegroni.com. I like to keep it all in one handbag. It's
I
all
like
there.
that. I like that. Well, I've been on your site. I have followed you on all your social medias. I do find it very interesting. Like I said, you've had a fascinating career in terms of investigation and in terms of just your love of the industry and your love of travel. It's such a nice combination. And really, it's been a pleasure talking to you and to learning a lot more about it. And we would love to have you back on when your next book comes out.
Thank you. I will take you up on that offer. I will say I've been very blessed in my life and I appreciate that. But I like people and it's all about people at the end of the day. So thank you very much, John, for inviting me on. I enjoyed looking at some of your other interviews. I hadn't seen them before, but I enjoyed having a look at them. So
Well,
I look
thank you.
forward
I
to seeing this
appreciate
one and
that.
all the ones you do afterwards.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. You have a wonderful day and we'll keep in touch.
You too, John. Bye.
Thanks.